What if Batman landed in the lands between? Just the Dark Knight versus Elden Ring's nightmares. How would he survive? Who would hunt him? And how dangerous does Batman have to become in this wicked world? Hit like and subscribe, and let's jump right into it. He materialized not in a flash of light or a tear in the sky, but with the disorienting, suffocating sensation of having the air pressed out of his lungs. Batman found himself kneeling on damp, cold ground, his lungs burning with an atmosphere that felt thick and metallic. The first thing he registered was the light, an unnatural, sickly yellow glow emanating from a colossal, ethereal tree that dominated the horizon. This was not Gotham. This was a place where the laws of physics felt optional and malice was etched into the landscape. He quickly assessed his situation. The batsuit was gone, replaced by the simple, dark, armored training uniform he used for high-intensity simulations, less conspicuous but offering no real protection against a lance or a sword. He had his belt, but the finite nature of his batarangs and smoke pellets was immediately obvious. He had been ripped from the middle of a dimensional experiment gone wrong, and now he was alone, mortal, and completely out of his depth. This was not a fight he could win with technology or fear. This was a fight for sheer survival. His first move was a retreat. He used the cover of dense, dead undergrowth, observing his surroundings with the hyper-vigilance honed by decades of urban warfare. He saw figures nearby, large, armored men shambling aimlessly, and a merchant huddled next to a fire. The air carried the distant, sickening sounds of screaming and combat. He realized immediately that the one thing that kept him alive in Gotham, his reputation, was non-existent here. He was just a vulnerable target. He spent the first 24 hours in continuous, forced stealth, moving only at night, hidden beneath the shadows of broken ruins near a place he later learned was the Church of Ella. He did not fight. He observed. He watched a battle between a lone warrior, a Tarnished, and a group of 3 Godric soldiers. The Tarnished, though armed with steel, fought with clumsy, desperate movements. He watched as the Tarnished was eventually felled by a spear thrust to the chest, falling with a terrible, final gurgle. But then, the body dissolved into a cloud of golden motes, and the Tarnished was gone. This discovery changed everything. He realized death here was not always permanent. It was a setback, a psychological weapon, but not a final end, at least for some. This single piece of information, gleaned through observation, instantly increased his odds of survival from 0 to perhaps 3%. He could afford to die in the name of learning. He could use his own life as a resource. This concept, however horrifying, was the key to moving forward. He needed gear and intelligence. Moving under the cloak of a massive dark cloud that momentarily obscured the Erdtree's glow, he infiltrated a small, abandoned soldier camp. He did not engage the 2 soldiers sleeping there, instead using a precise nerve strike to render them unconscious. A trick learned from obscure pressure point manuals. He quickly scavenged basic supplies, a thick leather tunic, a coil of rough rope, a flask of dubious water, and a rusted but serviceable short sword. He rejected the heavy, cumbersome armor, prioritizing stealth and mobility over inadequate protection. He knew a single blow would still kill him, armor or not. He needed to avoid being hit at all costs. This was not a world for the Batsuit. It was a world for the Ghost. His second day brought his first unavoidable encounter. He was moving through a small, fog-shrouded valley when a massive, golden-armored knight, the Tree Sentinel, suddenly charged into view. The ground trembled. The sight of the massive divine horse and the colossal golden lance was terrifying. There was no cover, no time to react, and no escape route. The knight's lance was leveled directly at his chest. His human speed was inadequate. He knew he was dead. The lance struck him with the force of a small truck, shattering his ribs, piercing his heart, and throwing his body 50 feet into a cluster of rocks. The pain was absolute, blinding, and final. His last thought was a searing acknowledgement of his failure. Then, darkness. He awoke with a gasping, wet cough. the smell of burnt sulfur and damp earth filling his nostrils. The cold stone beneath him was glowing with a faint, unnatural gold. He was kneeling next to a pillar of soft, shimmering light, a sight of grace. The pain of the lance thrust still echoed in his bones, a brutal phantom sensation. His chest was intact, healed instantly, but the psychological trauma of the brutal, agonizing death was real and immediate. He had been resurrected, but the experience was horrific. A woman in a cloak, Malenia, materialized from the light. She was spectral and solemn, her single visible eye fixed on him. "You are tarnished," she stated, her voice quiet. "Grace has chosen you. It binds you to the world until you fulfill your purpose." Batman stood up, rubbing the phantom ache in his chest. His mind, though reeling from the trauma of death, instantly snapped into interrogation mode. "What is the catch?" he demanded, his voice gravelly from exhaustion. "Why did I die and then reappear here? And what is this purpose?" Malenia patiently explained the law of the lands between, the blessing of the Erd Tree, the shattering, the power of the Elden Ring, and the cursed resurrection of the tarnished. She confirmed his initial observation. He was functionally immortal, but this protection was conditional. If he lost his will, his hope, his sense of purpose, Grace would abandon him, and his next death would be permanent. She offered him the accord. She would act as his maiden, guiding him to the Erd Tree. "I refuse your accord for now," Batman said. He was not going to bind himself to a stranger's hidden agenda. He needed intel. "Instead, tell me the laws of permanent death. Where does the grace fail?" Malenia listed the dangers. Death by the frenzied flame madness, which consumes the soul. The conceptual death administered by destined death. And most dangerously, the slow, soul-corroding effect of losing will. Batman realized the true danger here was not the lance of the tree sentinel. It was the psychological toll of this broken world. His mind, not his body, was the target. He spent the next 2 weeks living by a strict, punishing routine of scavenging and training. His batsuit was utterly abandoned. He wore the scavenged leather and chainmail, relying on the cloak to hide his face. His martial arts expertise was useless against the heavy armor and long reach of the soldiers here. Every time he tried a precise kick or a joint lock, he was met with a blunt sword and another traumatic, agonizing death. He learned to fight like a warrior of this land, a focus on parrying, using the shield for defense and the short sword for quick, efficient thrusts. He died 17 times in 2 weeks, each death teaching him a brutal, unforgiving lesson about medieval combat. He learned how to counter the slow, wide arc of an axe, how to listen for the heavy footfalls of a charging knight, and most importantly, how to run when the odds exceeded 2 to 1. His nightmares were no longer of his parents' death. They were of the cold steel penetrating his chest, the finality of the pain, and the disorienting, sulphurous resurrection. He found his Batcave, the abandoned Church of Ella. It was secluded, held a safe site of grace as a respawn point, and was defensible. He began to apply his detective skills, transforming the ruins into a base of operations. He used rope and scavenged metal wire to rig rudimentary tripwire alarms. He used the limited explosive powder he managed to scavenge from abandoned fortifications to create small, crude firepots for distraction. He began to map the region obsessively, noting patrol routes, water sources, and dangerous wildlife. His first non-lethal victory came when he successfully disabled 3 heavily armored Godric soldiers using pure stealth and his newly refined combat skills. He set a tripwire that caused a bucket of stones to fall, creating a loud, momentary distraction. He used the ensuing confusion to silently take down one soldier with a pressure point strike and disarm the other 2 with swift sword work that targeted the wrist and elbow joints, ending the fight with 2 powerful, non-fatal shield bashes to their helmets. He learned his strength was not in direct combat, but in his ability to prepare, adapt, and exploit chaos. He had survived the immediate threat, but now he had to face the deeper terror. The great runes and the monsters who held them. Batman realized that perpetual scavenging was a zero-sum game. He needed information on the great runes and a way to navigate the impossible architecture of Stormvale Castle. He knew the castle was the key to understanding the regional power structure, but a direct assault was suicide, even with the dubious protection of grace. He sought out the only known source of reliable, non-corrupted intelligence, the nomadic merchants. He found Kale back at the Church of Ella, setting up a small new stock. Batman approached him in the dark, cloaked and armed. "I need knowledge," Batman stated, placing a handful of scavenged ancient runes, the currency of the land, on Kale's blanket. "Tell me everything about the demigods and the shattering. Tell me how I can reach the central core of this world without dying permanently." Kale, unfazed by the terrifying figure in the cloak, spoke of the demigods like Godric and Margit, the corrupted power of the great runes, and the ultimate goal of the Tarnished, to become the Elden Lord. Batman rejected the idea of lordship instantly. His purpose was not to rule, but to fix the broken system. He recognized the greater will as the ultimate tyrannical authority, a cosmic dictator using its puppets to enforce a cruel, stagnant law. Kale also provided the intel he needed on two potential allies. First, Rogier, a sorcerer who had studied the forbidden, fatal magic of destined death and was now resting at Stormvale Castle. Second, a strange, talkative warrior jar named Alexander, who traveled the lands in search of battle. Batman decided Rogier was his immediate objective. A sorcerer who understood forbidden magic was an invaluable asset against the divine power of the demigods. Infiltrating Stormvale Castle was a masterclass in stealth. He did not charge the front gate. He used his training to scale the sheer, seemingly insurmountable outer walls using scavenged iron spikes and the rough edges of the old masonry. He spent an entire night climbing, his fingers bleeding, his muscles burning, every movement calculated to avoid alerting the patrols far below. He moved through the ventilation shafts and abandoned storerooms, mapping the castle's interior, noting the placement of every sentry and trap. He witnessed the true, horrifying madness of Godric. The piles of severed limbs, the pathetic vanity of the grafting, the sheer scale of the demigod's cruelty. This confirmed his moral duty. Godric was an irredeemable monster who tortured the innocent. He found Rogier in the castle's main chapel, injured and slumped over a fountain. Rogier was intelligent, philosophical, and knew the inner workings of the magical power structures. "You are not one of them," Rogier murmured, sensing Batman's foreign, non-magical nature. "You fight with silence and speed. You seek something other than glory." "I seek leverage," Batman corrected him. "I need a way to stop Margit, the fell omen, without sacrificing myself 20 times over. I need a defense against the holy magic he wields." Rogier's eyes lit up with intellectual fascination. He explained the nature of holy magic. It was the crystallized law of the Golden Order, a spiritual weapon that targeted the soul and the very law of existence, making it uniquely dangerous to a mortal man, even one protected by grace. Rogier, however, offered a distraction: his custom sorceries. Batman formed his plan. He would not defeat Margit through strength, but through guerrilla warfare and coordinated effort. He would use the terrain, his traps, and Rogier's arcane abilities to create a momentary window of vulnerability. He was now 3,000 words into his impossible journey, no longer a scavenger, but a strategist, building a fragile network of intelligence and support against the overwhelming power of the gods. The confrontation with Margit, the fell omen, was a logistical nightmare. Batman understood that Margit was the primary physical barrier to the castle, and his holy attacks were the one force that truly bypassed the resilience of the Grace Resurrection, making death against him particularly traumatic. Batman's plan was built entirely on diversion and misdirection. He spent 3 days preparing the arena outside the castle gates. He used his short supply of bat grip gel, a remnant from his utility belt, mixed with scavenged oil to create a large, invisible slick directly in the omen's expected patrol path. He set up a series of 3 heavy swinging log traps, salvaged from old construction scaffolding and rigged with his rope, hidden above the bridge Margit patrolled. He armed Rogier with precise coordinates and a specific time of engagement. Batman was the support. Rogier would deliver the killing blow. When the time came, Batman initiated the sequence. He used a single smoke pellet near the bridge's foundation, creating a sudden, thick fog that obscured Margit's vision for a crucial 5 seconds. Margit, alerted and enraged by the intrusion, charged the source of the smoke, which was strategically placed far from Batman's actual location. As Margit charged, he hit the oil slick. The massive, horned omen stumbled, his heavy momentum turning into chaos as his feet slipped. This was the window. Batman immediately activated the first 2 log traps using the rope, sending heavy beams swinging down to strike Margit's armored shoulders. The blows were purely concussive, not magical, and momentarily stunned the omen. Margit roared, regaining his balance and summoning his immense spectral cudgel. As he prepared to unleash a devastating holy magic counterattack, Rogier struck. From a distant, hidden turret, Rogier unleashed his most powerful sorcery, a volley of glittering, magical projectiles that struck Margit's chest with concentrated force. The combined assault of physical concussion, directional chaos, and concentrated magic was too much. Margit, distracted and unbalanced, staggered. Rogier, using the last of his strength, channeled a final, devastating bolt of pure magical energy that pierced the omen's dark armor. Margit let out a final, agonizing howl, a sound of defeat and profound bitterness. He did not dissolve, but collapsed, inert, his massive body lying still. He was defeated, but not necessarily dead. "I won't kill him," Batman stated to Rogier through the small voice amplifier on his helmet, his voice raspy. "He's duty-bound, not evil. He must be immobilized." Batman and the heavily wounded Rogier quickly secured Margit, using the heavy ropes and chains that Batman had scavenged from the castle's siege equipment. They dragged the immense, unconscious omen far away from the castle, chaining him within an abandoned, sealed cave where he could not interfere with the plan to overthrow Godric. The victory was bittersweet. Rogier was severely weakened, his strength spent, confirming Batman's suspicion that every victory in this world was Pyrrhic. Batman was physically intact, but the immense risk and the constant psychological strain of fighting such power was wearing on his mental resilience. He knew he had to strike against Godric immediately, before the pressure of the greater will could bring another champion to defend the castle. With Margit neutralized, the path to Godric was open, but the physical threat remained immense. Batman knew a direct confrontation with the grafted demigod was still impossible. He needed an inside asset and a strategy based on assassination, not combat. He pressed deeper into Stormvale Castle, utilizing his intricate knowledge of the structure gained from his infiltration. He found another crucial ally, Nephili Lu, a warrior who carried herself with fierce honor and a deep hatred for Godric's grotesque practices. She was driven by justice, a concept Batman understood immediately. Batman revealed his true purpose to Nephili. "I am not here for the Elden Ring. I am here to stop the torture. Godric must be neutralized, permanently, but I will not engage in a fair fight. We will use poison, explosives, and the terrain. I need your strength and your knowledge of his fighting style." Nephili, though accustomed to the honorable combat of the Tarnished, immediately saw the ruthlessness and efficiency of Batman's plan. She agreed to the partnership, her warrior's code bent slightly by the necessity of stopping a greater evil. The plan was a coordinated ambush. Batman spent an entire day creating the ordnance. He mixed scavenged smithing stones and fire grease to create 3 powerful custom explosive charges, designed not to kill, but to shatter bone and shatter the grafted limbs. He acquired a powerful poison from a hidden nomadic merchant, a slow-acting toxin known to weaken the resilience of demigod flesh. The execution took place at the moment of least resistance, just before Godric's expected midday meal. Nephili used her knowledge of the castle staff to slip the toxin into Godric's ceremonial wine. It was a partial success. Godric drank the wine and was immediately weakened, his movements sluggish and his voice raspy with pain. but the demigod's vast physical constitution prevented a total collapse. Batman and Nephilim struck instantly. Godric was waiting in the courtyard, still monstrously powerful, surrounded by the horrific trophies of his vanity. "You pathetic little rats! You think a child's poison can stop a demigod?" Godric roared, swinging two massive axes with his main arms, while his grafted limbs flailed wildly. Batman moved not to attack Godric, but to detonate his explosive charges. He threw the first charge directly beneath Godric's main leg. The resulting blast was focused and concussive. The steel was dented, the stone cracked, and Godric roared in genuine pain, his stance momentarily collapsing. Nephilim used the distraction, charging forward to slash at the demigod's exposed ankles, slowing his movement further. Batman's strategy was relentless: aim for the grafts. He used his powerful, spring-loaded grapple gun, a desperate remnant of his belt, now repurposed, to shoot a cable directly at a massive, stitched-on arm. He anchored the cable to a stone pillar and pulled with his entire body weight, tearing the graft clean off Godric's shoulder. This surgical dismantling drove Godric into a state of pure, desperate madness. He stumbled back, then reached down and, with a final, sickening tear, pulled the dragon head from his pile of trophies, fusing it to his shoulder. Phase 2 began with a torrent of white-hot magical flame that bathed the entire courtyard. Batman and Nephilim were forced to break the line. The dragon fire was immediate, consuming everything it touched. Batman had seen cosmic fire, but the magical nature of this flame was deeply unsettling. He was 5,000 words into this nightmare, his suit scorched, his human body pushed past its limit, facing a monstrous threat that would demand the ultimate sacrifice. The dragon graft fire was relentless and absolute. It was a wave of magical energy that promised not just incineration, but soul-scorching. Batman shielded Nephilim with his body, using his own scorched leather tunic as a minimal heat sink. He knew his only chance was to turn the environment against the fire. He had mapped the castle's antiquated water system during his reconnaissance. He threw a heavy, fragmented batarang with maximum force, targeting a massive, corroded pipe directly above the courtyard ceiling. The blade pierced the metal, and with a rush of pressure, a deluge of cold, stagnant water burst forth, creating a sudden, blinding cloud of steam that filled the courtyard. The steam instantly disoriented Godric and smothered the most powerful force of the dragon fire. Batman used the thick, swirling fog as his cover. "Nephilim, retreat! I need you to draw fire and stay alive," Batman commanded, his voice barely audible above the hiss of the steam. Nephilim, realizing the hopelessness of the melee, began to move, drawing the dragon head's confused blasts of fire away from Batman's approach. Batman closed the distance, his short sword now useless against the armor. He needed a kill point, a vulnerability that was impossible to guard. The only option was the eye socket of the grafted dragon head. He climbed onto the demigod's massive, flailing main arm, scrambling up the grotesque appendage like a spider. Godric could not hit the small target clinging to his own body. He reached the dragon head. He gripped his scavenged short sword with both hands, using every ounce of his human strength, fueled by adrenaline and rage at the sight of the grafted victims. He did not use fancy martial arts. He delivered one, single, powerful, and desperate thrust directly into the dragon's open eye socket. The blade pierced the soft tissue and plunged deep into the neural nexus where the dragon head was grafted to Godric's main body. The demigod let out a high-pitched, gargling scream that echoed with finality. The dragon fire extinguished instantly. Godric's immense, chaotic form collapsed, hitting the stone floor with a deafening final thud. The battle was over. Batman stood on the inert corpse, his body shaking from the effort, his lungs burning from the smoke. Nephilim rushed back to his side, her shield scarred but her spirit intact. Then, the final, agonizing consequence. The Great Rune. A monstrous, pulsing orb of corrupted golden light emerged from Godric's lifeless chest and dissolved into Batman's own flesh. The sensation was immediate and profound, a wave of pure, unfiltered vanity, madness, and obsession with stolen strength flooded his mind. It was a violation of his deepest psychological defenses, a psychic wound that threatened to compromise his sanity. He fell to his knees, clutching his head, fighting the intrusive corruption of the demigod's soul. He fought the psychological war for 3 full minutes, wrestling the madness down, locking the rune's malignant influence deep within the disciplined, reinforced walls of his own mind. He had won the physical battle, but he had lost the psychological purity of his own mind. He had killed, and he had absorbed the spiritual residue of that killing. He was 6,000 words into his fight, holding a corrupted piece of a broken god, and he knew he could not sustain this level of violence. The psychic residue of the great rune clung to Batman like a second, grotesque skin. He spent the next week recovering in the secret depths of the Church of Ella, analyzing the intrusive madness of Godric, and training his mind to firewall the corruption. The pain of the physical trauma, the burns, the lacerations, the bone-deep exhaustion was secondary to the mental strain. He was alive, but profoundly scarred. He realized the next step was no longer about combat. It was about cure. He needed a way to remove the greater will's influence without resorting to the destructive options presented by this land. He focused his intelligence gathering on Caelid, the land of the Scarlet Rot, the conceptual plague that had once crippled Radon. He needed to understand the ultimate form of physical corruption to find the ultimate cure. He sought out Alexander, the great warrior Jar, whom he found stuck in a deep hole, struggling to free himself. Batman, using his immense human strength and the scavenged ropes, freed the giant Jar in mere minutes. Alexander, astonished by the silent man's competence, became an invaluable source of cultural and strategic knowledge. From Alexander, Batman learned the noble tragedy of Star-Scourge Radon, the general who was a victim of the rot, not a tyrant. He learned of the festival, a ritual of mercy designed to give the afflicted general an honorable death. This confirmed Batman's new goal. He would not kill Radon, but attempt to cure him of the conceptual disease. Batman journeyed to Caelid, wearing a thick cloth mask over his mouth and nose, using a simple, scavenged torch to ward off the airborne spores. He found the land to be a toxic, horrifying vision, a world where death did not bring peace, but an eternal fungal agony. His microscopic vision, though strained by the atmospheric pollution, confirmed that the Scarlet Rot was a conceptual life form, a self-replicating magical entity that fed on biological and spiritual vitality. He located the shrine of Gowry, the strange, cryptic merchant who served the outer god of rot. Batman approached him with surgical caution, knowing this man was a servant of a cosmic power. "Tell me the nature of the rot," Batman commanded, his voice low and threatening. "What is its weakness? Where is its cure?" Gowry, however, was immune to fear. He spoke of the rot as a beautiful, inevitable fate, explaining that it was the very manifestation of an outer god. "There is no weakness, warrior. There is only the cycle, and the only cure is the one that lies in the hands of the rot's chosen goddess, Malenia." Batman realized that curing the rot required opposing the will of an outer god directly, a task that would challenge his very human limits. He gathered his next crucial piece of intelligence, the tragic story of Millicent, the woman infected with the rot, who was seeking her destiny in the face of the plague. Batman knew he could not save the world without saving Millicent first. Her plight, an innocent woman slowly being consumed by a god's illness, became his new moral purpose. He was 7,000 words into his journey, realizing that his greatest enemy was no longer the demigod, but the slow, agonizing process of divine decay. Batman's next challenge was purely logistical and psychological. He had 2 great runes of corrupted power sealed within his mind, and he was hunting for the cure to a conceptual plague while avoiding permanent death. He was now operating on sheer willpower and intelligence. He located Millicent near the Church of the Plague, her body showing the flowering pink signs of the advanced scarlet rot. She was resigned to her fate, seeking only to understand her destiny. Batman refused to accept her resignation. "I will not let this disease take you," Batman stated, kneeling before her, ignoring the thick stench of fungal decay. "I have fought plagues, and I will find a counter-agent. Give me the knowledge of the rot's cycle. Tell me what you know of its goddess." Millicent, taken aback by his absolute refusal to surrender to fate, told him about Malenia, the blade of Miquella, and the unalloyed gold needle, the only known countermeasure to the rot's divine control. The needle, she explained, was Miquella's creation, designed to halt the decay without eradicating the rot entirely. It was the only sliver of hope. Batman recognized the task. He needed to infiltrate the most dangerous, diseased locations in the lands between to retrieve a specialized tool. His human body would have to endure impossible conditions. He first had to reach the Gale Tunnel and the polluted areas of Caelid, a region teeming with corrupted, agile monsters and environmental hazards. He crafted a specialized biofilter from scavenged metals and thick cloth, incorporating a mild narcotic he found in a ruined apothecary to dull the agony of the spore's contact. It was a flimsy human shield against a god's plague. He entered the Gale Tunnel and the deep, corrosive parts of the Aeonia swamp. He moved with a combination of stealth and absolute desperation. The swamp's water itself was a slow poison, targeting the deepest biological processes. He forced himself to move only on the slivers of dry land, using his grapple gun to swing across vast stretches of the contaminated water, never allowing his feet to touch the ground. He had to rely on his sheer upper body strength and perfect timing. He fought the corrupted creatures in short, brutal bursts of violence, using his sword and shield with savage efficiency. He was no longer a martial artist. He was a desperate survivor. He died twice in the swamp, once to a hidden spear trap, and once to the sheer corrosive power of the water when he fell. Both deaths were excruciating, the feeling of his lungs and skin dissolving, a trauma that fractured his mind further. Each resurrection was followed by hours of silent, meticulous mental reconstruction. He was becoming numb to the pain, which was the most dangerous development of all. He was losing his emotional response, turning into a machine driven solely by will. He eventually retrieved the needle. The small, gold object pulsed with a faint, purifying light. It was his only tool against the cosmic disease. He returned to Millicent and, with surgical precision, inserted the unalloyed gold needle into the flower bud on her decaying arm. The result was not a cure, but a halt. The spread of the rot stopped instantly, giving her and Batman a fragile reprieve. This small act of mercy, the successful application of technology and willpower against a divine plague, was a crucial moral victory. It solidified his purpose, to heal the lands between, not to conquer it. He was 8,000 words into his desperate survival, having won a skirmish against a god's will, but the final, unwinnable fights loomed ahead. Batman was now a known entity, the silent champion, the tarnished who fought with cunning and mercy, the one who carried the great rune but refused the throne. He knew he had reached the point of no return. To truly save this world, he had to confront the greater will's deepest defenses. He had to face the most skilled, most terrifying adversaries, Malekith and Malenia. He traveled to the mountaintops of the giants, seeking the path to the forbidden areas, focused on finding the destined death itself, the conceptual weapon that could end his conditional immortality. He knew that to truly understand the threat, he had to look it in the eye. He recruited Alexander again for the final, impossible phase. The warrior jar, filled with respect for the silent man who fought with honor and ingenuity, agreed to accompany him to the most dangerous areas, believing Batman's quest to be the greatest battle of all. The journey was a blur of constant, high-intensity threats. Batman had to use his full arsenal of tricks, explosive distractions, hidden traps, and precision strikes to disable the massive enemies of the mountaintops. He died 3 more times, once to a giant's club, and twice to the bitter, magical cold that threatened to stop his heart. His deepest challenge came when he finally located Malenia, Blade of Miquella. He found her at the base of the massive halig tree, resting, waiting for her brother. Batman did not attack. He studied her. He watched the subtle movement of her blade, the perfection of her form, and the dormant, terrifying power of the scarlet rot coiled within her. He knew a direct fight was suicide, even with dozens of resurrections. Her legendary attack, the waterfowl dance, was a sequence of impossible, unavoidable strikes that would kill him instantly, 20 times over, before his body could even register the first fatal blow. He chose a different path, diplomacy and warning. He approached her openly, his hands empty, his stance non-threatening. "I am not here to fight you, Malenia," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of his unwavering will. "I am here to warn you. The greater will is a tyrant. Your purity, your loyalty to your brother, is being exploited by a cosmic dictatorship." Malenia opened her eyes, a flicker of cold, terrifying attention focused on him. "You carry the scent of Godric's madness, yet you possess the grace of a true warrior. You are confused, alien. I serve Miquella. I serve my own blood, not the Golden Order." Batman realized he could not break her conviction, only challenge her knowledge. "Then know this," Batman stated, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "The outer god of rot is the ultimate enemy. It is poisoning the very essence of life. You may control it, but you are also its greatest host. My purpose is to free this world from the tyranny of all outer gods. I offer you an alliance, a chance to free yourself and your brother from this system." Malenia refused the offer, but the confrontation had served its purpose. Batman had challenged her purpose, placing a seed of doubt and confirming her status as an insurmountable physical threat. He retreated, knowing the final battle lay ahead. He had 10,000 words left, and the last of his journey would be against the embodiment of destined death. Batman was now a machine running on pure, strained willpower. His body was a tapestry of healed scars, his mind a fortress desperately holding back the tide of Godric's insanity. He had two final targets, Malekith, the Black Blade, and the ultimate manifestation of the greater will, the Elden Beast. He flew to Farum Azula, the crumbling, time-warped city, knowing that Malekith wielded destined death, the conceptual weapon that could bypass his grace and deliver a final, permanent end. He left Alexander behind, knowing this fight was a suicide mission and a necessary one. The confrontation with Malekith was quick, brutal, and horrifying. The warrior was faster than Batman could process, moving in blurs, his black blade radiating cold, absolute finality. Batman tried to use his tricks, his smoke bombs, his grapple gun, but Malekith was too fast, too ancient, too absolute. Batman did not win. He was struck 3 times by the destined death blade. The first blow severed his arm, the flesh turning instantly to black ash. The second pierced his side, and the third, the final terrifying blow, struck him directly in the center of his chest. The pain was beyond anything he had ever known. It was not physical, but existential. The blow did not just stop his heart, it erased the concept of his being. His body crumpled, and the golden light of grace did not appear. The world dissolved, turning cold and silent. But in that final moment of true, permanent darkness, one thing remained: his will, his purpose, to save the innocent and oppose tyranny, did not falter. He had lost his body, but he had not lost his hope. The grace returned, not as a blessing, but as an angry, desperate retrieval. He reappeared near a distant site of grace, his body whole, but his spirit shattered. He had survived the ultimate weapon, not because of his body, but because his will was simply too strong to surrender, even to conceptual erasure. He realized the horrific truth. He could not win this war. He was too wounded, too mentally compromised, and too mortal to face the final threats. He had pushed his human limits beyond any possible measure, but the cosmic enemy was simply too vast. His final act was one of strategic retreat and ultimate purpose. He used his last reserve of strength and intellect to guide Rani's remaining allies toward the Erdtree, using his presence as a temporary, terrifying decoy to distract the final defenses. He provided them with the intelligence on the Elden Beast's core weakness, its reliance on the greater will's fixed law. Batman did not participate in the final battle. He retreated to a small, isolated cave, his purpose fulfilled. He had saved the innocent, provided the means for the world's liberation, and endured the unendurable. He had nothing left. His mind, broken by 24 traumatic deaths, finally began to shut down. The physical exhaustion was total. He lay down on the cold stone, the corrupted great runes finally settling into silence. The light of grace faded to a faint, uncertain flicker. The silence that followed was not the quiet of death, but the silence of exhaustion, of the ultimate surrender of a physical being who had faced the impossible. He had not become the Elden Lord. He had merely become the broken hero, a man who carried the entire moral weight of a dark fantasy world until his human will gave out. He was gone, not dead, but finally at peace, his tragic story complete.